Welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast.
Sorry, I was reading. Piper's teacher made a comment on one of her projects, and I was reading her comments. Hello, everybody. It's me.
So yeah, let's cut straight to the chase. I fired all my co-hosts, and then I had to crawl at my wife's feet and beg if she would come on.
You didn't have to beg. I said yes.
Okay.
I knew it was coming because Nick, eventually when you hear this episode, you've been in our family calendar for a few weeks now. So I knew that the question was coming if I would co-host with you tonight because Nick was going to be out.
To be fair, I mean, I did ask several weeks ago.
I know when Nick actually appeared on our family calendar is when you asked. I knew the question was coming when I approved that it go to my calendar.
I mean, you did want to be the wife of a famous podcaster.
No, that wasn't ever part of the deal when we got married. You always say that.
Well, I mean, it was
you were never a podcaster when we got married. When we were dating, that was never a thing, and I never wanted to be that.
But
no,
but as much as I talked, I feel like you should have seen this coming. Like I only had.
I didn't even know what a podcast was until you told me to take your picture for the very first episode that you did by yourself.
That'll be the next me and my wife episode is the start of this crazy
I didn't know what I didn't know what a podcast was. That was the very beginning of podcasts. Oh, Philip.
It wouldn't be you and me if I didn't make it a little awkward right out the gate.
It wouldn't.
All right, admin work, and then we'll get to topic. Patrons, there's at least one of y'all in the chat right now, and I appreciate all of you sociopaths, and the rest of them are probably in the group chat, heckling each other, plotting against me, God only knows. If you'd like to support the show, there's a link in the show description to Southern Gals that has our shirts. I am absolutely god-awful about making sure I'm wearing one for the show. Although in the name of full disclosure, I have put on a couple of pounds, so they don't fit anymore. Unfortunately. You can go ahead and say it. I know I need to
There
give a big
wasn't
butt
anything
out there.
I wasn't saying anything.
There was a smirk.
There
was a smirk.
Well,
it's
there
on
may
the
have
internet.
been a smirk, but that you don't know what the smirk was for. There wasn't anything.
Okay. And Cypress Survivalist. That crazy idea we had is still going. We have our first family camping trip, I think was what we called it. There's an official name, but I call it family camping trip.
Yeah, family camping trip, I think is what we called it.
And I know it's in November. And I've actually been really good about saying what day in November it was. But I'm drawing a blank.
I think it's the 14th, November 14th.
But if you're curious, there's a link in the show description, and it goes to that website, and the information is there.
And those of you who know me know that I'm horrible about posting to anything social media with regards to any of our businesses or whatever. But you can follow the Instagram and Facebook pages of Cypress Survivalists. There is a posting there. You can also subscribe to the newsletter. If I do actually put out a quarterly newsletter, yep, I do one newsletter.
I mean, to be fair, like
Kyle's going to be asking for the Matter of Facts newsletter soon.
So bearing in mind that the new school year just started, and that means everybody with school-age children goes to DEF CON 1, and you're a teacher, Nick's wife is a teacher, one of our merch provider has a teacher in the household. Like, it's not been an appropriate time for additional tasks. It's pretty much been survive the day and then pajamas.
Yes. Sometimes I don't even get that far. It's just to lay in the bed and then I'm dead for the next 8 hours.
Yep, Jeff. 2 weeks till prepper camp. We won't be there. Not this year.
We will not.
But if you go, say hi to everybody, and I hope you have fun. But I actually was not going to talk about hurricanes. I wasn't going to. I think we made it through most of this hurricane season without talking about hurricanes, until everybody in creation started talking about the 20th anniversary of Katrina, and Kyle brought it up. And so here we are.
Yes, Kyle wants a newsletter. Kyle wanted us to talk about hurricanes. Kyle. I'm totally joking, Kyle.
I was about to say, but we love the Wilsons.
Oh, yeah, absolutely love the Wilsons.
So the one thing I find, like, we've talked about Hurricane Ida fairly recently because it happened more recently, but it's been a hot minute since we talked about Hurricane Katrina. And the thing that I thought would make an interesting conversation was Hurricane Katrina from both of our perspectives, because the juxtaposition.
Yeah, we had two different.
Yeah, well, and that's the juxtaposition, is that for Hurricane Ida, we were married, we were living together, we had our own home.
Oh, yeah.
We were together for that hurricane. And for Hurricane Katrina, I mean, we evacuated together, but once we came back into the state, you went to your parents, I went to duty, and from that moment forward, we had very different experiences around that hurricane.
We had only been dating for 6 months.
Yeah, about that. So I guess let's start in the beginning.
In the beginning was me.
Well,
and Phil was in Iraq.
Yeah.
Not that far.
Well, I mean, no, that's appropriate. Like this is like 2004. I can't remember exactly what month. I know that Thanksgiving was when you went home and told everybody you were marrying me. So like that's when
they didn't believe me.
Well, we sure fooled them.
Here we are, breaking all the bets. Yeah. So, okay. So you came home from Iraq in February of 2005.
Yep.
And then 6 months later, Katrina is barreling towards the coast.
Yes.
And at that time, it was what, a 5? No, it was a 5 because Ida was a 4.
Yeah. Katrina blew up to a Cat 5 pretty close before landfall. I mean, it was enormous, but it really picked up a lot of steam right at the last second.
And to be quite honest with you, it was my first hurricane because I grew up in North Louisiana. I didn't know about, I knew about hurricanes, but it was never on my radar because we lived more through, okay, well, we can bring that in too. Kyle said, and also 9/11. Sorry, brain's not working. It was my first hurricane. And so I grew up in North Louisiana.
Tornadoes and ice storms mostly.
Tornadoes and ice storms. And so I came to South Louisiana to go to school. I wanted to go to Southeastern, where my parents went, where my grandparents went. The whole family went to Southeastern. That's where I wanted to go. And anyway, fast forward to August of 2005, and here comes our first hurricane. Well, Phil is still on active duty.
I was on reserve duty at that time.
Okay, reserve duty.
I had come off of active duty, gone back to guard status, and I was still in the Louisiana National Guard until June of 2006. So I was finishing out the very end of my first 6 years.
Yeah. Okay. So, Phil, okay. Oh, sorry, y'all. When Phil says that, I'm a teacher, and if you know someone who is a teacher, it's only September. We've only been in school for 5 weeks. My brain doesn't work, and it's 7:30, and I'm already in my pajamas. So, give me a second while my ADHD brain tries to catch up with stories.
But this does give me an opportunity to bust out the Samuel L. Jackson voice and be like, "English, mother effer, do you speak it?"
He says that to me a lot. No, I don't speak it. Not today. I don't. Also, it's been a very trying week, as most of you can imagine. So,
yes.
Anyway, so Hurricane Katrina is now barreling towards the coast, and this one here and his dad are like, we need to evacuate. And I was like, evacuate? Wait, what are we doing? Like, where are we going?
We getting our little Caucasian behinds out of the way of this thing.
And so my whole family, not my whole family, but a lot of my family lives down here. So my grandparents, they were staying. They had a generator. They were going to be fine, blah, blah, blah. They also they didn't live as much in the path of Katrina as Phil and I did at the moment, or at the time. Actually, yes. Well, not you, but me. Anyway.
Hurricane Katrina went almost directly over Slidell. Like it went
where you live.
Yeah, it went almost directly over the Pearl River, which
Mhm.
separates Slidell from Mississippi, basically.
And I lived in Hammond, which is about 45 minutes west of Slidell, which doesn't sound like a whole bunch of length or time or whatever between the two, and it really wasn't, because the damage was just as bad in Hammond.
And Katrina was so enormous that
yeah, it didn't matter where you were. I mean, it was such a big storm, you were going to be impacted.
It was like mouse hunting with a 12 gauge. I mean, it was going to hit you no matter what you did.
So my grandparents said they were going to stay. My uncle was going to stay. I don't know what everyone did. I just remember thinking, okay, well, I'm going to evacuate with my boyfriend. And I got into a car it was me and you and our now brother-in-law, but Phil's best friend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ross was with us, and we dropped him off in Eunice.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to go. So contraflow was active. Phil had not been called to duty yet, and the governor at the time wasn't going to.
I gotta reel this back a couple of steps.
Okay, then you take the lead. You tell me.
No. I mean, just to get what we were doing up to the point where you're at.
Okay, so go back then.
So like that morning, like me now, in the name of full disclosure, like my family kind of grew up as a default evacuate family. Like, growing up, we didn't have generators, and we had a box of hurricane snacks, but we didn't really have we didn't have what we needed to be cut off from civilization for 2 weeks at a run. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why my family always was in the mode of, if there's a big hurricane coming, we're going to go at it. We're going to get out of its way. We're going to go stay with family. We'll come back in a few days. Everything in the fridge will be ruined, and we'll just replace it. And, that was just the way we dealt with hurricanes, was get out of their way.
Mm-hmm.
So for me and my dad, it was never really a question of, like, are we going to evacuate? It was, if we're not going to, if this thing doesn't move or turn, we're going to get out of its way. So that morning, I think it was Saturday morning, I got up and went to work, worked a long shift at work, and Dad and I talked before I left. And
that's right.
He had told me, he said, if this thing doesn't turn by noon, your mom and your brother are getting on the road, and you should get on the road as soon as you get off work. So by the time I got home that afternoon, my brother and my mom were, they were already smoking, heading towards Texas. My dad had packed up because he worked for the power company. So he was getting deployed to a facility that the company had set up to like house them and keep them out of harm's way, so they would be able to come back in and restore power afterwards. And I was helping my dad secure the house, and I was packing a bag and going. Now, prior to all this, I called my guard unit, and I had volunteered to come in because I kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, this is going to be really, really bad. And at that point, my dad was still in a position to drive me into the city, drop me off, and then get back out. My guard unit told me, you haven't been activated, go ahead and go. So I grabbed my bag and came to pick up you. And yeah, at that point, I was like, I am not going to Texas and leaving you here. Like, pack a bag, let's go. So we actually left my car
at my apartment.
At your apartment.
Mm-hmm.
We got in your car, so the two of us were together, and then we started heading out.
Maybe Ross wasn't with us. He was driving his truck, but we were.
I think you're thinking of when Ross was running fuel trucks for FEMA.
No, I'm not thinking that. We literally were together. I remember we couldn't go over the Mississippi Bridge, the Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge. We had to go north and cross in the like the Eunice area, and he was headed to Eunice because that's where his family was. Yeah. I do remember that. And then we kept going on to Texas.
Yeah. From your house to East Texas, where my family is from, where we were heading, that's normally like a 4.5, 5 hour trip. I mean, I want to say we were on the road 8.5, 9 hours. I mean, it was a journey to get there.
Oh yeah. With contraflow and everyone trying to evacuate and get out of the state. It took us a long time to get to Texas. And then we get to your grandparents' house and unload, and your poor mother, oh my God, I will never forget how sick she was. She had, we took the Raggle Fraggle. We took the old bridge because the I-10 bridge What you could, it wasn't moving.
Highway 190.
Yeah, we took Highway 190.
For the sake of argument, or the sake of background, Raggle Fraggle, I think, is in Opelousas, or in that
He
area.
said, they said, oh, my neck of the woods. So
Yeah.
really quick, I grew up about 20 miles south of Arkansas in a little bitty town called Homer, Homer.
No!
Not that Homer, but that Homer. Very, very, very small town.
Not Homer.
In between Ruston and Shreveport. Anyway, back to that. Your mom had the flu. We had one bed that we could sleep in, one pull-out couch, and your brother slept on the floor. Somebody slept on the floor. I don't remember. Anyway, I don't even think that's important or what people want to know. But I do remember, so we did take my car, and we're sitting there and we're watching the news, and we are literally watching until the broadcast went out, and the news wasn't broadcasting anymore. We couldn't pick up anything because everything was gone at that time. It was like everything was gone and underwater. And then we started to get more and more like world news and national news and things like that. But the local news stations weren't producing much at that point.
I gotta throw comments in before we go. Dr. Scary Guy said, holy wow, it really is a chat, and they really do exist. So this has got to be one of our podcast listeners who hasn't caught a live stream before.
Oh, hi.
And confession, I don't think I've ever heard these fine people speak at 1x, talk faster. It's a common podcast thing where you set the speed of like 1.5 or 2 times so you can listen to it faster.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, I won't be talking faster.
This is my normal speaking tone, guys. Like, this is as fast as it comes.
I do that too when I'm listening to audiobooks, and then I have to slow it back down to regular speed because my brain can't keep up.
Does it make everybody sound like a chipmunk when it's sped up? Or
well, it's weird. Okay, so I know this is a side note, but I'm listening to this. I'm listening to this book right now, and the main character speaks at 1.5. The main character speaks fine, but it's the other characters that come in where I'm just like, I don't know what they said. Like, I keep having to go back, and so I finally was just like, whatever. I'll listen for another extra 10 hours so that I can get through this book. Anyway. So we evacuated to Texas. Phil gets, so the storm passes. Phil gets the call that he's got to come back.
I actually got the call Sunday at
as it was making landfall.
Yeah, Sunday morning, I got the phone call that, hey, we've been activated. You need to get to, I can't remember if at first they were telling us to go to.
Wasn't it Alexandria? Because your cousin was going to take you, or your uncle or something.
So it's not Alexandria. It's a very small town around Alexandria called Pineville.
It was a ville.
Yeah. Well, Pineville, in the name full disclosure, I was in 1st 244th Aviation Battalion, our Louisiana National Guard. And Pineville is where 812th Medevac Battalion is, which was our sister unit. So that's where our unit had kind of like grouped up, and that's where they were trying to get everybody directed. And that's where they asked me to get. And I was like, I don't have a vehicle. Contraflow is still engaged. And I basically told them, like, the only way I can get to y'all is if you drive me into the path of that hurricane. And I'm like, if my girlfriend takes me into the path of that hurricane, y'all got to put her in a barracks or something. You got to put her up someplace because I'm not putting her back on the road to try to get out of the way. And they said that for one reason or another, they couldn't let you stay there. And I was like, well, then I'll see y'all in a couple of days. Like, that's just the way it's going to be.
And it was a couple of days. And then my memory gets really foggy. I remember my parents coming down to get me from your grandparents. I think I remember that. But I don't remember, like, who drove my car, or did I keep the car?
I thought you took your own car.
I don't know. Y'all, this was 20 years ago. I don't even know what I ate for dinner 3 days ago.
So I know you took your car towards your parents. My grandparents were actually on their way to go pick up a cousin of mine that got stranded. I mean, yes. he got out of harm's way. He checked him. See, he lived in the French Quarter, so he wisely got the hell out of Dodge. Right. But he was stranded in a hotel room. And if I remember right, I don't think Cousin Frank had a vehicle. I mean, he lived in the French Quarter. You know what that's like. There's nowhere to park. You walk everywhere you want to go. So, like, I think he caught a ride out of town with a friend of his and got stuck in this hotel room and had no way to get out, no way to check out. So my grandparents were on their way up to go pick him up, and on the way there, they dropped me at Pineville. So I show up for duty with like civilian clothes, my military ID, and a bag of clothes, and that's it. No uniforms, not even a pair of boots, nothing.
But you had your own firearm.
No, I didn't, because I sent that with you to
With
North
me.
Louisiana. So,
I remember. Yes. Okay. I remember the gun. I had to bring the gun.
So bearing in mind that there was a lot of weird that happened around this situation, but like under normal circumstances, if you're activated even at state level for the Guard, you wouldn't be bringing personal weapons with you. Like you would secure them someplace and you get issued like one of the Army's firearms. But all of our weapons were still in the vault on the second floor of our hangar that was at Lakefront Airport under 12 feet of water.
Yeah.
So
on the second floor in Lake Pontchartrain.
Yeah. Now, as it turns out, the water didn't get high enough to flood the vault, but you couldn't get to it. So, like, all of our weapons, all of our night vision goggles, our motor pool was at Jackson Barracks. All that got flooded. So, like, they literally, when they got the order to evacuate and they took the aircraft, they stuffed them full of like oil and parts and toolboxes and stuff we needed to keep them flying, and they left and they locked everything else up. So I get there expecting like, okay, I'm here, but I don't have anything I need to do my job. And they were like, here's a pair of mechanics coveralls. You're gonna wear I ended up wearing that same pair of coveralls. I want to say for like 10 days straight.
Yum.
Well, okay, but to be fair, we were taking whore baths, behind the hangar for several days because there was no showers, no running water. We were eating MREs, we were drinking bottles of water. I mean, one of my memories from Katrina was, as much as people were complaining about the situation that the civilians were in, you know what I'm saying? The soldiers were in most of this exact same situation. Like, we were sleeping on cots. We were wearing the same uniform for days on end. We were working 14, 16-hour days. We were eating MREs and I had a lot of soldiers whose homes were destroyed. So, like, we being a Louisiana National Guard unit, we were in exactly the same crappy situation everybody else was in. And there was nothing that could be done about it. Like, there's no point complaining. You just got to suck it up and deal with it.
It was awful, but I think I stayed in North Louisiana at my parents' house for two, maybe 3 weeks, because there was nothing we couldn't come down. They wouldn't let anybody into the areas. I think it was probably 2 weeks, and then I was able to come back down to Hammond. But my side of the state, which is, like I said, is, I know Kyle's like, we need a state map of Louisiana. So if, I know you can't see this, but think about Lake Pontchartrain. I'm going to try to do this. Like, here's Slidell, here's Hammond. So that's like how far we were from each other. It wasn't far at all. We were still technically both on the North Shore, but my side got hit with a lot of tornadoes. So over in Hammond, it took us 3 days to chainsaw into my grandparents, who was there. They lived on like 300 acres of land out in a country town, middle of nowhere, and pine trees everywhere. And so their driveway, which is about 3/4 of a mile long, was just covered in pine trees. And so it took us that long, not us, but everyone, to get all of the trees cut just to get down to their house. Luckily, nothing really hit the main house. It hit some of the houses around them.
Which that was, I know that you and I had a very brief debate before we evacuated, where like at first you were going to stay with your grandparents, and I really got aggressive and said, like, I understand your grandparents have a generator and all that, but I'm like, but once this thing comes through, they're going to be cut off from civilization for days. And if somebody gets hurt, either you deal with it yourself or you die. I mean, like, that was my worry, was that like if a tree came down through the roof, or it just if somebody had a heart attack, for God's sakes. You're going to deal with it yourself, or you're not going to make it, because I knew that they were going to be cut off from civilization for days.
They were. Absolutely, they were. But anyway, we got to them. They were fine. Like I said, there's one of the little houses next door. We called it the playhouse. It's a party house or whatever. It was kind of demolished from the trees falling. But anyway, they were fine. My apartment was fine. There were no trees around my apartment anyway. And then y'all's house was fine.
My parents' house, thankfully, was fine. I think the only casualty we have is that the fridge turned into a science experiment.
Everybody's does every year.
We got, I mean, I will say this much. My parents got super lucky because all of our backyards had some pretty substantial trees in them. And it just so happens that the wind was blowing the right direction, that every one of those trees fell laterally through the backyard. So like our neighbor's tree wound up in our backyard, our tree wound up in the neighbor's backyard, but none of them swung and hit the houses.
Yeah.
So all the fences were demolished. Everybody had a wood pile in the backyard. Everybody had a snarl to deal with. But once power was restored, my parents were able to go right back home. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly fortunate that the damage that they suffered was minimal. I mean, I think the sum total of the Rabalais damage was there was 3 shingles missing off the roof and the fences were down, and the fridge died.
Yeah.
But we did have a soldier, one of my sergeants, him and his family lost everything.
Is that the house we ended up going to?
Yes.
To try to salvage what we could? Yeah, that was a day I'll never forget. It's a smell I'll never forget either. I don't know if any of you have ever been through a flood, but when the flood waters recede and things start to decay and there's food left over and
the mud.
I mean, it was awful. And the smell of this rot and the mud, and it was like you were literally walking on the bottom of a pond or a lake or whatever. It was just 8 feet, up in people's houses. And so literal mud caked to everything.
Yeah.
Everything was gone. And
picture albums, wedding dress.
He tried to get as much as he could, but there was just nothing that you could get there. It was just gone. I mean, it was almost like as it came in, I mean, it was like it opened up every crevice it could and it seeped into everything. But that was everyone's home that flooded like that. I mean, the storm surge was so it was just crazy. I don't even know what the statistic was, like how much of a storm surge there was up in Slidell.
I don't know about Slidell. I know that.
Along the banks of the Wrigley's and all that stuff, and the lake.
I mean, those are all 10 to 12 foot raised houses down there for a reason. Like that, yeah. The area she's talking about, for everybody that doesn't live down here, is kind of the outskirts of Slidell. Well, it's the outskirts of Slidell over on the east side. It's towards it's towards the Mississippi state line, and it's basically there's a couple of really, really high-end subdivisions and then just fishing shacks out there. But they're all raised because they fully expect a normal day with a Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane is going to be 6 foot storm surge. And that's not noteworthy. That's what happens. It's the same situation at our lakefront. Mm-hmm. They get 3-4 foot storm surge from a bad storm. I mean, it's unnerving.
Yeah.
Couple of things. Kyle is joking about alligators and snakes and rougarous, but honestly, that's one of the worrying parts after a major hurricane comes through, is that there will be alligators and snakes everywhere.
I mean, fast forward a couple of months after Phil had come home from being deployed to New Orleans to handle everything afterwards, you were working as a pool guy, and there were so many times where alligators were just in the pools. I mean, yep. People's backyard pools turned into swamps, and the snakes and the frogs and the alligators and possibly rougarous were all back there.
Might be too much information, but I'm going to tell you right here now, there is nothing that'll make your butt pucker up faster then you're going to a house to like drain a pool so you can clean the pool out and everything and do a restart on it. You throw the suction hose into the pool, and then you see an alligator go thunk and pop up in the pool. That is a 10 out of 10. Turn around, go back to the truck, shut the doors, and call animal control. And like call the homeowner and be like, we're going to come back in a couple of days because I'm not playing with dinosaurs.
You should have just shot it so we could eat it. Shot it. Shoot it.
Shoot them.
Shoot them. Shoot them.
Yeah, but if you miss and you punch a hole in the pool, then we get sued.
Speaking of alligators, over the summer, an alligator walked through our playground at school, climbed the fence, and walked through our playground at school.
Yeah, that meme.
10-foot alligator, big girl.
That meme that where you see the alligator climb the chain link fence, that's legit. That happens.
Climbs the fence. Two, actually. It climbed 2 fences and walked across the field into the playground, climbed the fence into the preschool playground where the kids were inside. Fun fact.
I'm suddenly reminded of the fact that every time something weird happens down here, I get at least one person that's like, you must all be insane to live in that place.
We are.
I mean, probably.
We're going to leave one day.
Ryan Martin, that name's Raggle Fraggle asks, do I know Ryan Martin? That name sounds really familiar, but
I don't know. So anyway, where were we?
Well,
so Phil, okay.
Let me throw some stats in here because as we're talking about like coming back and what we found, so Katrina was tied for the most costly hurricane in the Atlantic Basin in terms of like dollars of damage done. It was $125 billion in 2005 dollars. The levees of New Orleans breaching put 80% of the city underwater. I wouldn't say it all stayed underwater the whole time, but that's the statistic. It's 80% of the city was underwater.
Should we put that up there?
We can.
Okay.
And, like I personally, like at least my recollection or what I remember of Katrina when we came back, there was evidence of wind damage, but it was the flooding that really stood out to me. Like the soldier's house we're talking about, it was a prefab house that was raised off the ground, and that house had floated up off of its pylons. If that gives you
right.
Because like I remember
he got here, we got to the house and he was like, my house has moved.
Yes, it's not where I left it. I mean, it's not like it floated down the river, but he said it had picked up and shifted and set back down. If that gives you an idea of how much storm surge you need to float a double wide.
That was crazy.
And then like as we were driving into the city initially, in Laplace, there used to be 3 gigantic oak trees right there off the side of the interstate. Uh-huh. And I remember them because I used to have a friend that lived in Laplace, Tony, and I used to drive by those oak trees every time. Like if you were making that turn from Interstate 10 to 55 to head towards Hammond, you would drive right by them. Well, when I pulled in there coming out of Baton Rouge, all 3 of these gigantic oak trees were laid over on their side. They didn't break. The roots just pulled up through the earth. And as soon as I saw that was my first big, oh my God, this is going to be bad moment. Like I had never before in my life seen a hurricane do that kind of damage, which Katrina was a bad one, but it was heads and tails the worst I had seen up to that point.
Well, it was my first, and it was.
Well, you started with a bang.
I started it off with a bang. Yeah.
I'm just checking through the comments, make sure we're not missing.
Rachel. I love Rachel. She said, that's why I like the snow. It doesn't want to eat you. Very true. It does want to freeze you, though.
Yeah.
As I sit here in my blanket.
We don't judge. But yeah,
menopause is a bitch.
Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I feel like our experiences from Katrina were really different, though, just for the simple fact that like we were separated. Like at that time, I was still in the National Guard. I was on duty. I was literally, turning aircraft and keeping them flying so that they could go take part in the rescue missions. And I tried to keep in touch with you as much as I could, but you know what getting calls and text messages out was like back then.
Well, we couldn't. There was no, all of the cell towers were underwater. Like they had either fallen, which happened in Ida too. I mean, I guess I don't understand that part. Like you would think that 20 years later,
Different problem.
Okay, well, but still, the infrastructure would have lasted.
So we'll talk about it when we get to Ida. But for Katrina,
I'm jumping the gun.
For Katrina, the problem was with like not all, but a number of those cell towers actually have backup power. But with the volume of flooding they had down there, that was out of the picture. So the towers that were remaining, and a lot of the telecom companies did actually bring in mobile towers to try to restore cellular communications, because it wasn't just civilians using cell phones; it was civilians, military, law enforcement, first responders. Everybody was using cell towers.
Also, let's be completely honest. 20 years ago, we were still using razors and the Pearl. What were they? Nobody
Pearl.
had an iPhone. I didn't have an iPhone.
No,
I had just graduated from a Nokia.
I had an LG flip phone.
Yeah,
like, flip it open and
with the battery this thick, like half an inch.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something. That gigantic
flip phones.
So she used to tease me all the time because I was the only nerd that actually paid extra to get the gigantic, extra length battery that made the phone like 3 times as thick.
It was huge.
Yeah,
it was
but I could
pulling out a 90s car phone from your pocket.
But it would last like 3 days on a charge, which came in really handy during a hurricane.
You've always been a prepper.
Well, I always planned ahead.
You did.
But like I said, I mean, it was one of those situations where, like, even though I was kind of neck deep in Hurricane Katrina, I felt reasonably insulated from it in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, we're sleeping on cots and eating MREs, but I wasn't going to go hungry. I had food and water. I had shelter. Like, it wasn't like I was on my own to figure it out by myself, because I had the entire Department of Defense and the state of Louisiana behind me, keeping me supplied. So in some ways, I looked at Katrina and I almost felt like I got a front row seat to it, but I didn't have to deal with it by myself. You know what I mean? And I don't know what I don't know how you felt during Katrina, because I feel like, with you evacuating from it and with Hammond taking so much less damage, I don't know what that was like when you came back to your apartment. Like, were things I know power was restored, but like, were gas stations running? What was the situation on the ground?
Okay, now you're asking me questions that my memory bank does not hold. I don't remember wanting or needing for much, like, because I was in North Louisiana for the first 2 weeks after Katrina, so I didn't come directly back home. You know what I mean? So I was, by that time, especially in Hammond, I feel like the gas stations were back up and running. There was
grocery stores.
There were some groceries. Sorry, I got to chill because I'm cold. So I don't remember all that. I remember coming back. I lived with my cousin at the time, and you and we couldn't talk every day. But I knew you were in New Orleans or Belchase. And I would see you every few days, mostly on the weekends when they would release you. I do remember thinking that saying that your living conditions in Belchase were worse than what you had in Iraq, and you were even probably safer in Iraq than you were in New Orleans. And I know, probably not, but girlfriend thinking, hearing the news, you're going to get punched.
I'm picking.
Girlfriend. Now I'm fired up. No, but I mean, so I think there was a documentary that was just released for the 20th anniversary. I think it was on Netflix or something. And I was talking to one of my coworkers about this, and she was saying things like, I had heard rumors that people were being shot and there were, gunfights in the street and all this other stuff. But this documentary doesn't say that any of that happened. And I was like, lady, let me tell you stories of what my boyfriend at the time, my husband, came home to tell me was happening in the quarter and happening down in New Orleans and during rescue missions. And, I mean, even your sister who has worked natural catastrophes like this before can tell you that people still shoot at first responders and things like that. Like they may not want the help. Sometimes they want to be the victim, and you coming to save them is not part of their plan. But it wasn't a safe place to be.
No.
There was one night where Ross was running fuel.
He was working for FEMA.
Yeah, but we had to go. His truck broke down in Belle Chase.
It was
right by the base.
Yeah, he broke down a few hundred yards away from my base.
But you had it was 11, 12 o'clock at night. You had just come home, being released from the base. So you had just come home. We get the call that Ross is now broken down. We have to drive all the way back down to Belle Chase to get him at 3 o'clock in the morning at this point. And you were like, make sure you have your ID, make sure you have this, make sure you have that, and whatever, because we're going to get stopped and they're going to ask who you are and why you're here and you're a civilian and blah, 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 blah. I don't remember that ever happening, though. I don't remember us getting stopped. So, but it was happening all over the city.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when I had actually, most of the time when I'd get a release for a couple of days, I would leave Belle Chase. I'd come up to see you. But at one point, I had actually gone back to Slidell because my parents had gotten home. So I went to Slidell, check on them, take care of some stuff for them. And I left Slidell and went back to Belle Chase. So I was coming in over the twin span when they just got through putting that back together.
Oh, that's right. Because the twin span fell into the river.
Yeah.
Not the river, the lake.
So they converted one of the halves of the twin span into a 2-lane highway. And I took that. So I was coming in through New Orleans East, and I was driving over the interstate, trying to get across town to go back to Belle Chase. And I came across a literally like a barricade in the middle of the interstate with a sign pointing to the off ramp. Yeah. So I took the off ramp, and there, right in the middle of the intersection, is a Humvee and 2 young soldiers, and they are M16s at the low ready. So I flick my headlights off so that I'm not blinding them, and slowly pull up to them and shut the vehicle down. I know the whole drill. They walk up to me and see I'm in uniform, I have ID, and they're like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm Louisiana National Guard. I'm heading to Belle Chase. That's where my unit is. I'm just coming off a 2-day release." So they were like, "Okay, that's cool. Are you armed?" And I was like, "Yes." And they like. My first reaction was like, yes, and I'm allowed to be armed. So why are you asking? He said, yeah, we weren't going to let you go unless you had a gun, just to be safe. And then they told me to drive around their Humvee, get back on the interstate, and keep going. And they radioed ahead because apparently there wasn't another barricade on the interstate because that was past the checkpoints. But they were radioing everybody else to let them know, hey, we're letting a Louisiana National Guardsman get back on the interstate. Because if not, I was told I was going to have some Humvees chasing me down, want to know why I ran around the guards.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, but the problem was that I wouldn't say it was like Baghdad levels of gunfights in the streets, but there was shooting. There was
looting.
There was a ton of looting. There was a ton of petty crime. I actually, in my travels, I talked to a limo driver when I was working at the airport. He had lived in New Orleans East during Katrina, and he said he observed himself 2 local gang members had stolen a mail truck from the local post office, crashed it through the front door of a gun store, and stole all the guns out of it. And they were just driving around the hood selling guns out the back of a mail truck for like trading for cash, for gold, for drugs, for whatever they could get in the middle of Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a wild time. I wouldn't say I felt like I was in danger, but my yardstick might have been forcibly rearranged by 12 months in Iraq.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, after 12 months getting mortared every day, I was kind of like, they're a bad shot anyway. I'll be all right. I mean, it sounds psychotic when I put it that way, but that was the way I felt. I didn't feel like I was in danger because kind of had, spent a long time being in danger.
Mm-hmm. So that went on for about 6 months.
Yeah.
Phil was back and forth for about 6 months, rebuilding I mean, you don't rebuild from a storm in 6 months. I think 5 years later after Katrina, so 2010, people were still rebuilding. There were blighted communities, people who didn't come back, people who weren't allowed to come back. They just cut their losses and stayed wherever they evacuated or moved somewhere else. And so all of those houses had to be destroyed. And, that's when all of the celebrities decided to come in and build all these prefab houses that eventually 3 years later had to be destroyed again because of all of the toxic
the Chinese drywall they bust in.
all the toxic chemicals that were in these houses, and people were getting sick and all that stuff, so they had to knock down all those houses, and all those people were homeless again. I mean, it was just one thing after another. Obviously it wasn't handled well. I mean, I don't know of a time in New Orleans where tragedies or things like that are handled well. But you can still go to New Orleans. You can still drive through the East. You can still see areas that took damage during Katrina and never came back. For instance, if you ever want to just look it up, I mean, I know there's documentaries about it, but Six Flags in New Orleans, or Jazzland is what it was called too. Yeah. That still stands. Like, it's still there. As you drive through New Orleans East into New Orleans, you will see this blighted community amusement park that just sits on the side of the interstate and nobody's doing anything with it. And so that's what some places down there look like still.
I know that at least I think it was 2008 was when I was working for Boucher Heating and Air. It was an HVAC contractor in Chalmette, which is like a little suburb in the New Orleans metro area. But I would say probably half the houses we worked were houses that were getting rebuilt post-Katrina. And I mean, I have a very distinct memory of this one house in Chalmette where the outside of the house looked brand new. The inside of the house was a work in progress. I mean, the homeowner literally, he got his insurance check and he gutted the inside of the house and was rebuilding it from studs. And we were coming in to put in a brand new air conditioning unit and everything in. And what stood out to me was the outside of the house. The outside of the house looked brand new because it had just been enclosed and everything. But every other house on the street, 4 houses in either direction, looked like the day after Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. Debris line on the outside of the house, like as tall as I am. And I just thought to myself, like, I don't know why my mind went there, but like, I went to this place of like, why would I rebuild this house and want to come back and live in this house on this street? And this is the rest of my neighborhood.
Because like, another hurricane, another Katrina is going to happen eventually. It's going to come back. And one may not be as bad, but in the last 20 years, we've had 4 or 5 major hurricanes follow almost the same path as Katrina has. So,
but even, I guess what I'm saying is, like, even if the Lord came down from the clouds and said, I promise you another hurricane will not hit your home for the rest of your life here, you still have to wake up every morning and look at all these blighted houses around you. Like, sorry. I totally understand everyone who took their check and left and never came back.
Absolutely.
Because the communities they grew up in where you knew everybody, especially some, like, I want to say these small towns. I mean, New Orleans is a big metro area, but you know how a lot of these small communities were. Places like Westwego and Chalmette, even Gretna to a degree, even though Gretna's a pretty big area. Like, these were communities where people genuinely knew their neighbors and they knew everybody there. And it was, everybody knew everybody. And when all those people get scared of the 4 winds and the community's broken, a lot of people said there's nothing to come back to. There's no home to come home to.
Yeah.
Like, even if I could rebuild my house, everything that made this home is gone. So, like, I don't know. To me, like, that was the thing that really stuck out to me about Katrina was it completely eradicated whole little communities in an evening. In an afternoon.
Yeah.
Wiped whole families off the board where hopefully they survived, but like there was no coming home because there was nothing to come home to.
Mm-hmm. And that's when you started to see a lot of these like Cajun restaurants or South Louisiana cuisine pop up in mountain towns and things like that, because that's where they evacuated to and that's where they landed because they didn't want to come back. I would say not all of them, but anyway. All right, are we fast forwarding to the fun show?
Is there anything else you want to toss in here for Katrina?
No. I mean, there's obviously more that happened. There's more that everyone went through. I mean, you can watch the documentaries or whatever, but as far as our story is concerned, I don't. Oh well, I will add this part. After 6 months of Phil being on active duty, and all of the missions to save people off of roofs and find bodies and go through houses and everything like that were all done, I wrote a letter to my congressman and got a little investigation started into the Louisiana National Guard that eventually came back to Phil through his officers. You want to tell that story? You tell it so much better.
So basically, like, the sentiment amongst the troops was that, like, you know, the rescue mission was largely over. A lot of us a lot of people still had homes they were trying to recover, had businesses they were trying to restart, college we were trying to go back to, jobs that have been calling us saying, hey, when are you coming back? Like, I don't want to sound selfish, like, hey, when do we get to live our lives? But we had really gotten to a point where the rescue mission was done. We were in a recovery phase, and a lot of us on the ground felt like we're basically just being used to fly around news crews and, you know, politicians. Like, there's no more reason to keep all of us here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I couldn't express that being in uniform because UCMJ and all those kinds of things. So I did what I was supposed to do, kept my mouth shut, and, you know, Charlie Mike. This one, on the other hand, was not in uniform and wasn't subject to UCMJ because we weren't married at the time. So she wrote a letter to our congressperson. And within a week or two of that, basically my chain of command sat us all down, put a piece of paper on the desk and said, if you want off of duty, sign that.
Well, my favorite part of the story is, I don't remember who it was. It was one of
my sergeants.
Was coming off of the helicopter. And you were there because that's what you did. You worked with the helicopters, and he made some comment about Rabalais. How is your girlfriend doing? Didn't he?
It was something to that effect.
Yeah. And he asked you about the letter, and you told him, I can't stop her. She's a civilian.
Well, literally what I told him was, I'm like, she's not subject to UCMJ because we're not married, and she can write her congressperson anytime she wants. I mean, I politely told him to, you know.
I love that my name was brought up in meetings.
Apparently, I don't know if your name circulated or if it was just the whole, okay, someone here has a girlfriend who wrote a letter to a congressperson, and they just assumed it was me. I think maybe you put a few too many details in there.
I still have the letter somewhere. I don't know. So maybe I did. I don't know. Well, either way, it worked.
Well, the first problem was that if you identified me as being in Bellchase, that was a very small group of us that were there. So it probably didn't take a lot of time to figure out who the culprit was.
Well, you came home. So did everybody else.
Yeah, I came home. A bunch of us got off of active duty. I mean, I don't have any regrets about the reason we went to go do what we did, but I
have no regrets either.
I did kind of feel like, okay, we've done what we were supposed to do. It's time to go. We got stuff to get back to.
All right, let's do Ida but we've done Ida 1,000 times. So
yes, but I'd like to compare and contrast.
Let's do it.
So 16 years later, you and I are sitting here watching the news. We're married. We have our own home. You have this crazy prepper husband who's spent the last, at this point, 16 years thinking about what happens if the next Hurricane Katrina hits, and I can't get my family out of harm's way, or I can't evacuate, or there's some reason that we get stuck, or we have to ride this out. I had spent at this point 16 years mulling this question over of how do I protect my family when the world turns upside down?
Mm-hmm.
And Hurricane Ida did not start out as this state destroying, like wipe out 5 zip codes storm. it looked like it was going to be a Cat 2. It got up to a Cat 3. And then as it approached the coastline, it just exploded.
It made landfall as a 4.
Debatable.
And it's not debatable. It came out the other day, like as Katrina, as the end of August, when the Katrina anniversary came out, they posted this picture. The meteorologist in New Orleans, all of them were using this graphic of the last 4 major hurricanes that hit the Louisiana coast, and it said that Ida was a 4.
I know that at the time, though, there was a lot of debate about some instrumentation at Port Fourchon where it made landfall that seemed to indicate the wind speed was higher than what.
Okay, but when it got to us, it was a 3, but it made landfall as a 4. But what Ida did that I've never heard of before, and meteorologists down, at least in this area, had never even lived through, but they know about it, is called the brown ocean effect, that a hurricane will basically stall over the land, and it rains so much that it feeds itself and grows and intensifies even more. And so that's what Ida did. Just so happened to do that in our area. So we decided, okay, it's a 3. By the time it gets to us, it'll be a 3.
Well, it was our initial look at the data. It was supposed to make landfall as a 3, and it was supposed to go on the west side of Baton Rouge.
That's true.
So
yes. And by the time we decided we probably should evacuate, it was too late to evacuate.
Yeah.
So anyway, we decided to stay, and we huddled in the hallway right here. Now, we don't live in a big house at all. I mean, it's
1,500 square feet.
It's not a big house. So we're all huddled in the hallway with all the pets, except for the cats, who are just like, screw you guys, I'm going to go lay in a bed somewhere. And the dog, who's shaking and petrified, and I'm shaking and petrified. And then, we had cell service through most of the night. I don't remember the time it actually made it to us, and the winds were just so god awful. But I remember texting people or posting on Facebook or something every time a tree would fall and we would hear it. I was like, okay, there's 1 tree. Okay, now there's 7 trees. Okay, now there's 10 trees. And every time they would fall. So we live the wood line by our house. We have woods next to our house, and it's kind of a I wouldn't say a swamp, maybe. It's a watershed. So the ground is always saturated. Well, hundreds and hundreds of year old trees in these wood lines, and they're heavy oaks, heavy pines, whatever. So we're all in the hall, and I get this phone call from my sisters, and I'm talking to everybody on family group phone call or whatever. And I'm pacing because I'm having anxiety attack after anxiety attack, and I'm pacing and pacing. And when I tell you, the sound of the wind outside will, for about a year after the storm, anytime wind blew in the trees, I had an anxiety attack. The best way I can describe it is use your imagination, and you are huddled in somewhere. You can't see outside of where you are, but you can hear the demons whistling and screaming outside, and you could hear the wind just blowing, and it almost sounds like this horrible demonic presence outside, and it's trying to get to you. That's what my brain interpreted it as. There's something out there. It's trying to find us. It can't find us. I know that sounds really weird and creepy, but that's how bad and scary it was outside. So I'm pacing, not trying to go near the windows. I'm pacing and pacing. I walk into the foyer of our house, and the tree falls, and it hits the door, it hits the windows, it hits the house. That's the tree that fell on top of the house. And I'm literally 2 feet from this tree that has now fallen onto the house. And I know I scared the hell out of my sisters, but I was like, a tree just fell in the house. I have to go. And I hung up the phone, and I probably just should have said, we're okay. But that's not what I said.
Always start with we're okay and then explain what happened.
So I was on the phone when the tree fell on the house. And I go back into the hallway because at this point, I know that there's damage. There has to be damage. This thing was far too loud, far too heavy. The whole earth shook. The ground shook. The house shook. I shook. Everything shook when this big old oak tree fell on the house. And so I'm back in the hall. We're watching movies on iPads. We're trying to do whatever. Earphones are in. We're trying not to listen. And y'all, it was another tree's down, another tree's down, another tree's down. And it just kept going. It was tree after tree after tree. It was the scariest night of my life, the absolute scariest night of my life. And I've had my foot ripped off in a car accident. It was the scariest night of my life. And I looked at Phil and I was like, I will never stay for another hurricane as long as I live. I want to evacuate when a thunderstorm comes through. I will never stay for another hurricane as long as I live. I don't care where we go. If we have to stay in roach-infested Motel 6, whatever, I'm not staying. It was awful.
Second most damaging and intense hurricane in Louisiana history.
And we lived in the hall during this hurricane. It was awful.
Now, I've been very upfront about the fact that, like, with the benefit of hindsight and now seeing what that hurricane did and the way it changed direction.
And how it intensified over us. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
That's okay. I'm used to it.
Anyway.
But I mean, so, like, I know this sounds like amateur meteorologist, but, like, you can't live in this part of the world for your entire life and not start to develop kind of a sense of what hurricanes are likely to do, because you watch them all the time. You know what I'm saying? And our collective experience with hurricane is that very strong hurricanes do not change directions. Once it gets to a certain level of strength, they tend to just plow straight forward, or they're, like, once those spaghetti models all coalesce into one spot, that's where that hurricane's going to go. Usually, like, your Cat 1s, your Cat 2s, your tropical storms, they meander around like they're drunk and lost. But a Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane is a bulldozer. It just doesn't care. It doesn't care what the highs and the lows are doing. It doesn't care what the jet stream's doing. Once it picks a direction, that's where it's going. This hurricane got to land, sped up, and then shifted its track 45, 50 miles east, like that. And that was the moment at which Gillian, I looked at her and said, this just turned into a much worse situation, and it is way too close for us to try to get out. Because, like, my worry was that if we get on the road and get caught in this thing, we're in serious trouble. Like, we were already, I wouldn't say we were in trouble, but we were already looking down the barrel of a really bad couple of days. But my worry was, if we get on the road and we can't get out of this thing's way fast enough, we're at the point of we're truly risking our lives to have to ride out this hurricane in a car.
Well, and everyone stayed, like all of our family members that live around here, everybody stayed because we didn't think that, no one thought, even the meteorologists, no one thought that it was going to be the storm that it turned into. Yeah. And so a lot of people stayed. I mean, everybody on our block stayed. People that normally evacuate for hurricanes decided that it was going to be fine. It was going more towards Baton Rouge. We were going to be on the other side of, the wind part, and it was going to be okay.
I don't know if you remember, but when you and I had this conversation, I was emphatic about the fact that I'm like, okay, let's say it makes landfall as a strong Cat 4. It's going to be a 2 at the worst by the time it gets up to us, because we know that for every, like, so many 50 miles or 100 miles inland you get, the storm loses X amount of strength. That's kind of a known commodity because we deal with this so often. And we know what to expect normally. And then I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, this storm is like on the west side of Baton Rouge, and that's what, 50, 60 miles away from us? I'm like, okay, so if it's 50 or 60 miles away, we're going to catch the very edge of the band. We're going to get 40-mile-an-hour winds. Like, that's a bad thunderstorm. That's not worth evacuating for. Let's just, we might be out of power for a day or two. To hell with it. Let's just ride it out. And then when this thing heard that, apparently it decided to play FAFO with us, because the weather station at the foot of the causeway, which is what, 2 miles from us, logged 130-mile-an-hour wind. Now, I don't know if that was a gust or that was continuous, But it honestly doesn't matter. If that was 130-mile-an-hour gusts, then that means that the wind speeds in this area were sustained at 80 to 90 miles an hour. And 80 miles an hour wind speed is about where a pine tree starts snapping. So that's why we got buried in trees.
We had pine trees that fell in the in the woods next to our house, but mostly it was oaks and mostly oaks that fell.
Yeah.
And once we all started to cut them down and we're counting rings and trying to make the most of it. I mean, these were 200 and 300 year old trees that were not snapped, totally uprooted. Like the root ball came with them. That's how hard strong the winds were. And there was nothing holding them in the ground. And it wasn't just at our house where the ground is always soggy next to our house because of this wetlands or this area over here. But every tree you saw, it didn't just snap. The whole root ball was taken out of the ground. Like holes were left in the ground. It was not fun. It was not a fun event. And so what ended up happening was obviously the storm moved on. It slowed down, intensified, but it eventually moved on through the night. Phil and Piper went to sleep. I stayed up. There was no going to sleep. I was in too much of, too panicked. I was just too panicked. Once the tree fell, we had assessed as much damage as we could. We opened the front door as much as we could just to kind of see what we were dealing with. There was no way out of the house unless we went out the backyard. And at that point, we didn't know what trees and stuff were back there either because there was just no lights really to see anything and it was still raining. So we knew when we got up that we were going to have quite the
adventure.
Quite the adventure on our hands just to make it out of the house. And we eventually did make it out of the house, got to the front yard and saw it wasn't just one tree. There were multiple trees down in the front yard. One just happened to hit the house, but there were 2 or 3 trees down in the front yard. And we're again talking giant oak trees that just laid across the front yard. One hit my car and all, everything. And then the one that hit the house actually hit my car too. But neighbors across the street, the pine trees had basically, one of these giant pine trees landed on top of the water tank that supplies our little subdivision with all the water. And it had think of this cylindrical tank. It had creased it in the middle and it had popped up on both sides.
If you remember, I said in the middle of the night, we heard it.
We did. We heard it fall because then we heard a bunch of
you could hear the tank depressurize. And I said at that point, I'm like, we're not going to have water pressure in the morning.
Yeah, and we didn't. We didn't have water. We did have gas. Didn't we have gas?
We had gas.
Yeah, we had gas. Obviously, no lights. There was no power. We didn't get power back on, I think, 8 days. It took power to get back on. I know that there was a lot of back and forth with our friends from Matter Facts, a lot of patrons, Andrew, and then my sisters were also involved because the cell towers fell into the lake.
The high power lines that
something fell into the lake. That there was no cell service. There was nothing. And no one could get in contact with us. And the last thing that my sisters heard was that a tree had fallen on the house. So I understand the panic from my family, and I can't go back and change that night. But I know there were some messages and phone calls going out. Have you heard from the Rabalais? Have you heard from Gillian? Have you heard from Phil? Does anyone know how they are? Have you seen them? Have you heard from them? Blah, 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 blah. Nobody could find us, but we were here. We were fine. We just couldn't get anything out. And so eventually what ended up happening was I don't remember who told me, but Andrew was calling. Andrew was trying to get to us. And
it was about 4:15, 4:20 that afternoon. And I'm trying to think if I think one of us got a text message, but like cellular data was still down and everything. And that was the point at which as soon as I realized, I'm like, okay, the cell towers are obviously back up because we got a text that popped through. So I actually took my phone and disconnected it from the cell towers and then reconnected, kind of rebooted. And as soon as it booted back up, I mean, my phone and your phone flooded with, I mean, people were reaching out through text messages, through Facebook Messenger, Signal,
anything.
Any way anybody could get a message into us, which I was thankful for, because that's also about the time I managed to get in touch with my parents, so I could at least make sure they were okay. And then I think you got in touch with your parents about the same time, didn't you?
Yeah, but my sisters had already been in contact with them because they live about 40 minutes. They live close to Hammond. We've already talked about where Hammond is. So they live a little bit further west than where we live.
Which, incidentally, Hammond was more in the eye wall than we were.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, seemed to have less damage.
Yeah.
Haven't figured that out yet.
So that's when we learned that there was this brigade of friends and family that were all about to jump in their cars and come to South Louisiana to save the Rabalais. My sister and her crew came down from North Louisiana. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You know, she comes in, they set up a tent outside. We've got tents set up outside, like to sit under and things like that, because it was too hot to be in the house. And we just did what everyone after a hurricane does. You just start cooking all the food in your fridge and freezers because it's going to go bad. And the people who live near you or whatever, you just have these giant cookouts because the food's going to go bad and you need to eat because now you've got a lot of work to do. And I remember crying for like 3 days straight and just crying because there was so much devastation and so much destruction. And it was, again, one of the most scary moments of my life. And then you have our sweet little girl who wasn't a teenager at the time, flying a kite in the wind that's left over from the hurricane that had just left, you know? And so we got a battle plan together. We figured out what we needed to do and who we needed to check on. My cousins from Alabama came in with a giant U-Haul truck full of supplies. We had a lot of supplies. We ended up giving a lot of the supplies away to neighbors and people in our neighborhood that didn't even have a case of water to boil, to make food, to drink, anything. They didn't have anything. And so we went through the neighborhood and gave out supplies to people who didn't have stuff.
And everything that was left, we actually sent to my sister to the incident command center, so that like the first, and at that point, I think I think it was mostly like snacks and stuff like that, snacks and some paper towels, some stuff like that. But like, I got a call to Becca and said, "Hey, do y'all need any of this stuff? Because we've distributed as much as we can in our neighborhood, take care of everybody, and it makes no sense to send this stuff back to Alabama, and we certainly don't need it." So
and it was like cleaning supplies, food, water, toiletries, things like that. And
which to be fair, like I can imagine that the conditions that those first responders were dealing with were very similar to what I had during Katrina, like sleeping on desks, sleeping in your cars, working long shifts. Like I get it. I've been on that side of things before, where you don't get to deal with your emergency. You get to deal with everybody else's emergency first.
Yeah. And so that's when we figured out the game plan. We had to get these trees cut. We had to get them off the roof. We had to patch up the roof. We knew we needed to get insurance, in line for insurance. Once we got the cell service back, though, if you're ever in a natural disaster, and I will tell you this, find the number for, who is it? It's the, I think it's the Church of Latter-day Saints. Was it the Church of Latter-day Saints?
I think it was.
So these people come from northern states. Like, they were already stationed and positioned in Louisiana when Ida hit. They knew that the damage was going to be bad enough that their services were going to be needed. They're a volunteer group. They come in with chainsaws, wheelbarrows, and everything. So as soon as I got internet back on my phone, I put us in line to see if we could get I think it was the Church of Latter-day Saints.
It was LDS.
Just to see if we could get any sort of response. Maybe we could get some help out to get these trees out of the house, or, out of the yard, whatever, just to kind of get some normalcy moved, because eventually my sister and her kids and her husband were going to leave. They had to go back to their life. They weren't going to be able to stay. We got as much cut that we could with 2 or 3 chainsaws, and that's what we could do. Well, as my sister, I'm going to cry because that's what I do on these podcasts. As my sister is leaving and her family are, yes, Mormons. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word raggle fraggle. Anyway, as they're leaving, this group of volunteers in yellow shirts show up at my front door, and I'm crying because my sister's leaving. And I look at he's got a logo on his shirt, and he introduces himself and he says, "We're here. Your name was put on a list. We've done everything in this area. Your name was next." And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." Like, I was so overwhelmed that me and Phil were going to have to cut these trees back by ourselves, and, tons and tons of wood. And we had to position it in such a way on the front yard so that the crews could come and get them. And they weren't going to get them if they weren't in a certain position next to the road and things like that. I was just so overwhelmed. And then this man shows up, knocks on my door. He's about 6'5", probably 6'8". And this chainsaw was, in my head, was 12,
a big boy.
12 feet long. I mean, it was huge. And he said, "No, we're going to get this tree cut out of here in the next hour." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me."
Yeah. Well, me and Micah and Joshua and all y'all, like, we had managed to cut the majority of it ourselves and get it moved and stacked. But the problem was that this, I don't remember how big this oak tree was. I mean, there's part of it still in the wood.
It's still there.
But
it's actually regrowing.
There was like about 10 or 12 feet of this oak tree over the property line into our yard. And me and Micah bought me my first chainsaw that I reimbursed him for. And it was just a little 18-inch bar. And Micah had a big old farm grade chainsaw that I want to say only had about a 22-inch blade on it. And no one had a chainsaw big enough to cut the stump of this thing. Yeah. And then this dude shows up with a chainsaw as big as I am, and it was plenty enough chainsaw to cut.
But there were like 4 of them out there, plus all these little bitty chainsaws. And then all these children arrived with wheelbarrows and teenagers, but wheelbarrows and tarps. And I mean, and y'all, they were literally at our house for an hour. The tree was cut back to the wood line. The logs were thrown into the woods. What needed to be brought up to the road for the companies to come and pick it up was out in the pile where it needed to be.
And then they took care of our neighbor. Because and
then they cut that tree. That's right. They cut that tree back.
We didn't have that much left to cut because we'd done so much of ourselves. But our neighbors across the street really hadn't gotten to cut much of theirs. So I told the gentleman, I'm like, because they were like, "Is there anything else we could do? Because we're here." And I was like, "If you want to knock on the older lady's, his door that lives across the street from us, she'd probably kiss you if you can clear that tree for her." Mm-hmm. So they went over there and took care of that one too, which I'm sure she was appreciative.
It made life easier, because I remember thinking how overwhelming this was going to be for us. And it still was overwhelming. I mean, there was probably a good 12, 13 foot pile of trees in our front yard for 3 or 4 months. That's just how much damage there was. And the crews they couldn't get to everybody in a timely manner. So it sat in our front yard, the grass died, everything. And then finally one day I remember, of course I cried, but I'm at work or I was leaving for work. And I hear this god awful sound in the front yard. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is happening out there? And it's the big claw truck coming, and they're picking it up, and I took pictures, and I'm calling my boss, and I'm just crying. I'm like, it's gone. Like it's finally gone. It's out of here. Ida is gone. It was
probably about another 6 months before our yard came back.
Well, and we still have giant divots and holes. Sometimes you can't walk outside barefoot. You can't walk in the front yard barefoot for a while. You couldn't do it because when the tree fell, the limbs like dug down into the dirt, and they broke off. And so if you're walking barefoot, you were going to step on a broken limb that was buried 6 feet into the ground.
That first lawn mowing exercise, that was interesting because you and I had to go around and literally like take a shovel and dig up these limbs. And if we couldn't dig, I think there might have been one or two we didn't dig them up because they were just too far down in there. So I literally like dug a pit around it, took an axe, chopped it off, and then filled the hole in.
There were a lot of sand filling. We took a lot of this old sandbags from the storm and filled the divots.
That was the wackiest.
Sorry.
That was probably the biggest difference between Katrina and Ida. Like from my recollection, Katrina rained buckets, at least in our area. Like there was, we didn't get, the New Orleans metro area didn't get as much of the wind as it got the rain. And then Ida didn't rain that much, but Ida just had wind that it took over. So it was just it felt like a very, very different kind of hurricane. But I mean, I guess from my perspective, like when I think about those two hurricanes, and the only reason we're even talking about Katrina is it's the 20th anniversary and it's been a topic again. But like from my perspective, the biggest difference between those two hurricanes isn't even the hurricanes themselves. It's where you and I were in those two. Because when Katrina hit, we were fairly young. I don't want to say didn't have a lot of skin in the game. Like we didn't own our home. We didn't have any real reason why we needed to stand our ground and stay. I mean, we just load up in the cars and jetted. And if your entire apartment and my parents' house had gotten completely wiped out, I would have been out $200 in clothing. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So it was a very different perspective for us to just say, let's just get out of its way and we'll come back and deal with the problems later. And then for Ida, like in hindsight of how bad it was, we would have left. But we had a calculation to do in our heads of how bad is it going to be? What's the likelihood of damage? Do we stay? Do we leave? You know, like there's all those questions that come up. And Stuart recently, because of the 20th anniversary of Katrina, he was doing one of his famous thought experiments in the Signal chat, which if you're a patron, you should be in the Signal chat for patrons because it's a wild and unruly group, but they're good people. But Stuart did this. It was kind of this thought exercise of like, it wasn't a hurricane, but it was like sudden power outage, lasts for several days. What do you do? That kind of thing. And I realized very quickly, I'm like, okay, well, with my current position at work, if the power was out in like the whole metro area and was going to be out for a couple of days, I'd probably get deployed. I would probably get deployed. I mean, we'd have to.
Oh, okay. Yes.
We would have to have continuity of operations. I would probably get a phone call and say, hey, Phil, pack your bag and go. And they'd be booking me a hotel room in Shreveport. Mm-hmm. And I'd be taking you and Piper with me because I'm not leaving without y'all. So I was telling the guys, I'm like, you know, I'm in this position now where because of my Brian, better late than never. You're coming in just in time for the wrap up. But I'm in this weird position now where, like, because of my position at work, because of my seniority and the things that I do for the organization, I very likely would not be in that position again of ride the hurricane out at home, fire up the generator, try to get on the internet, just work from home. I would probably be deployed. And we would probably be deployed as a family.
Oh, and there's no probably.
But what I'm saying is that I've spent the last 16 years going through this thought exercise over and over and over of what do I do if A happens? How do I take care of my family? And you remember about a year ago, we were having this conversation about maybe I put some money aside to upgrade the home generator, upgrade the interlock kit, get set up for 50 amp, do this and the other. And I was even looking at getting a pair of 100-pound propane tanks so that we could literally, like, we could just bug out to our house, shut the power off, disconnect from the utilities. We'd be fine for a week. And the reason I didn't pursue that was because if I get the call to deploy and y'all come with me, there's no one here to run the generator. There's no one here to keep the fridge and the freezer from going bad. There's no one here to take care of the home. So the impetus to be able to like ride a hurricane out here kind of evaporated at that moment. Now I feel like I'm back in the position of, if it's a minor storm, we lose power for a day or two, and then things get restored and we're fine. And if it's a major storm, another Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane, we probably won't be here for it. Just because my work's going to pull the plug and say, nope, get your butt to Shreveport.
So when will you pull the plug? 2, 3?
That is a debate we haven't had to have yet, and I'm sure we will be having the same conversation we had in the past with a much more conservative yardstick.
Yes.
I mean, quite frankly, good night, Raggle Fraggle. We've been in that situation with severe thunderstorms, even where, you get very anxious, and I get it. I totally understand. But I always have to run the calculation in my head of what's the risk to leave and what's the risk to stay. You know what I mean? Because if we stay, we're pretty well bunkered in here. We've got most of the things we need to take care of the family for an extended period of time. But what's the risk if we stay?
Trees.
Yes. Which, to be fair, there's not as many of those as there used to be.
Okay.
Anyway, 20th anniversary of Katrina. It's not really that fresh on Gillian's mind, but I don't know. I don't remember specific events that much anymore at this point. I remember emotions and feelings, and I remember like these brief bursts where like something kind of crystallized in my mind. Most of what I remember was just, I remember it being like, it felt like the longest 2 weeks of my life. Like I know that we were on duty and we were doing things for months, but it went so fast in some ways. It felt like a week or two because the days just blurred into each other. Mm-hmm. But what I will always take away from Katrina was because I was moving around so much and I was from one base to another and I was helping this soldier and helping that soldier, I saw so much more devastation all across the New Orleans metro area. And for Ida, I was really laser focused on like my home, my street, my neighborhood right here. And this was all I saw for Hurricane Ida for a lot of it, a little bit around town, but that was it. I don't know, just very different experience being attached to the National Guard and being a full-blown civilian taking care of myself and my family. Mm-hmm. I can tell it's bath time.
I'm pooped.
Okay. Well, we won't belabor it. Kyle asked us to talk about Katrina and the 20th anniversary, and I threw Ida in because the comparisons kind of invite themselves. I'm pretty sure the Rougarou did survive Katrina. He's still running around causing mayhem. I think at the end of the end times, it'll be the Rougarou and cockroaches be the only things still alive. But we're counting down the very end of the 2025 hurricane season, and it's been unusually quiet. So I'm going to count our blessings on that one, and hopefully we manage to relocate before we get another Hurricane Ida, Hurricane Katrina.
Well, mid-September is the peak of hurricane season,
which always seems odd to me because Katrina and Ida both hit at the very end of August. I can't think of a really bad hurricane that whacked this area that was like the middle or the end of September.
I don't remember.
Research. Anyway, we'll go ahead and count this one out. Matter of Facts podcast going out the door. Mrs. Matter of Facts filled in for Nick. I don't think she'll be back next week. I'm not 100% certain yet what the topic is going to be, but I had a person reach out to me literally an hour ago asking to come on the show and talk about some things. So I have to wait for my co-host to get back into town, and then we're going to talk about, can we move the recording day? So if you're a patron, you should find out about it in Signal. And if you're not a patron, you should probably be watching, wherever you normally stream to look for the announcement. It'll come out 24 hours ahead of time. So don't miss it. Talk to you on the week. Bye, everybody.
Hi, y'all.